my songs to me. Sing them to me softly. Sing me sunlight and shadows, orange groves and meadows. Let your voice bring back my memories. Sing my songs to me. Bring my dreams to me. Bring them from the darkness. Let the minutes and hours show my mind strange new flowers. But I'd like to know where they go when the morning comes. Bring my dreams to me. Because it seems to me there may never be a better chance to see who I am, come timelessly dancing through my dreams to me. Arlo and Frank, welcome to the soundtrack of my life. Before I get started, let me talk a little bit about my walk with the guitar. I started playing back in, I think, the summer 1965, the year that I turned 12 years old. And I've almost always had a guitar. And I've almost never played well enough to be good. I've been able to plunk along, as you can tell by listening to that last song. But I've never taken that next step. I've always said, I'm gonna learn to read music. I'm gonna study real hard. I'm gonna be able to play sheet music. I'm gonna be able to play lead. I've started trying to learn music as many times as Mark Twain quit smoking cigars. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, he said, quitting cigars is easy. I've done it like a couple times a week for the last several years. And that was me. I would start and then I never followed through. So when I started this video series, the soundtrack of my life, the story of my life, which is the other videos that I'm posting, my thing was, okay, I'm going to simultaneously do these. But I kept trying to get better at the guitar, to memorize the songs. I put too much pressure on myself. I'm never going to be a good guitarist. But this isn't about guitar. You're not listening to this to hear, like, your grandpa play better than Eric Clapton. It ain't happening. I'm going to tell you the story of my life, and this part of it is going to be well served by using song. And I'll get to that in a second. The Japanese have something called wabi-sabi. And wabi-sabi means to embrace the things that are wrong with something. I'll give you an example. You make a cup to drink sake out of. And if you're really good at ceramics, you can make a beautiful cup. But if you make a cup that's flawed, that's your cup. When you're someplace in a room and there's a whole bunch of cups that look almost identical, you can pick yours out by the imperfections, by the flaws in it. And And so I decided to embrace that in these. The same way that I'm doing in the other videos. You know, I went to Toastmasters for a couple years, and I tried to learn how to speak perfectly. That's not what these videos are about. These are about getting a message to you. And if I make mistakes on the guitar, if I make mistakes in speaking, so be it. So I'm doing this the same as the other ones. One time, and unless it's really, really horrible, then I would maybe do it a second time. But other than that, just do it and see where it leads. So these songs are songs that influenced me in my life. They're not necessarily songs that I played, although some of them are songs that I played. Some of them are songs that I still play. But probably more are going to be songs that just for some reason had an influence over me. They are not in any particular order. Some of them are about a year or an event or something else going on in my life. I'm just making them as they pop out of this ADD-riddled stream of consciousness, kind of muscled brain that I have. This one is actually about a particular year, 1973, but it's greater than that. That was a seminal year for me with music. And one reason is because these songs came out. The one that I led with and the one that I'm going to close with. Like I said, the soundtrack of my life, songs and videos are part of the story of my life, which is me telling my story in my words to my grandchildren and any that come after them. Now, in 1971, I dropped out of high school. As soon as I was eligible, which was after my birthday in August of 1971, I took the GED and passed that. So I was a high school graduate. At the time, I was working as a trash man in Stone Harbor. I've done a couple of videos. One was about being a trash man there, but I've alluded to it in other videos. I wanted to stay down there at the end of the summer, but there was nowhere to live. I couldn't stay at the house in Stone Harbor. My parents would close it up for the winter. So that at a certain point in time, I was going to have to go home anyway. I couldn't stay with any of my friends. I didn't have a girlfriend I could move in with. I didn't want to take on an apartment, a lease, and all that kind of stuff. So I went to Philly, and my aunt Sis, who I did a video on recently, got me a job where she worked at Nicholson File in Northeast Philadelphia. It was making files. She got me a pretty sweet gig. It paid well, but it was mechanical. And if you know anything about me, you know that I'm not very mechanical. I sucked at it, and I hated that job. It was hot. And I guess in the winter it was cold, but I didn't let it go that far. I worked with a guy there named Tick Hockenberry. We went to Virginia with some other friends of his for a wild weekend of partying, and we were at a mansion. I don't know why these people were at this mansion. They weren't wealthy, but they were there, like an old pre-war, pre-Civil War mansion on acres of ground. It was just beautiful. We went nuts. And by the end of this thing, we decided that we were just going to up and leave our jobs and move to Venice, California. We were going to hitchhike out there. The two of us were going to figure out how to get jobs, how to get a place to stay. Neither of us had girlfriends at the time. So it was cool, roommates, and then we said what happens if we hook up with women, we'll just go our separate ways. I had been out there before, and I talked about that in another video. I had a buddy out there named Bill Case. He was going to UCLA Law School. And I contacted him, and he said, yeah, hey, listen, when you get out here, you can stay with us. I'll let both of you stay here, and then you can go find a place to live when you get jobs. Now, the first time that I went out there, I stayed for a little while, and then I hitchhiked home. This time, the two of us hitchhiked out. The first time, I wasn't there long enough to sink any roots. It was just kind of a visit. I was almost like a tourist. The second time, when we got out there, and that's an amazing story for another day, of us hitchhiking out there. Actually, both hitchhiking stories are pretty good. I stayed longer, and I was immersed in the early to mid 70s music culture of Los Angeles. The music scene was amazing. There were these little bars and clubs that you would go to, and you would hear people sitting in the corner on this little stage who were playing better than Stevie Winwood, Eric Clapton, any of these people, but they were lacking something else, like they didn't have personality, or they were ugly or something. I used to call them Eric Clapton with a hair lip. Like, oh yeah, we're going to go to see an Eric Clapton with a hair lip. And there were tons of great bands at the time. There were people like Pink Floyd, the Stones, the Eagles, the Beatles. But the person that I remember the most, the musician, the music that I remember the most from this era was Jackson Browne. And he did that song that I led in with that's called Sing My Songs to Me. The reason that I used it is because I'm going to be singing my songs to you, but I'm also going to be singing my songs to me. Jackson Browne's first two albums were really, really good. The first one was called either Jackson Browne or Saturate Before Using in 1972. And then the one that this song and the next song are from was called For Every Man, and that was released in 1973. And since I'm going to sing those songs, it made sense for me to lead with that song. But who was I back then? I was altruistic. And how altruistic was I? I had a Dick Gregory for President poster on my bedroom wall when I was a teenager. And that was from the 1968 election. In 1968, I was 15 years old, so I couldn't vote, but I was radical for Dick Gregory for president. He was a comedian. He was a communist, essentially. And this is before I went into the Air Force. Like, I had had many jobs, but I didn't have a job like the Air Force. You were into the military, and they have you, like, they're yelling at you, making you get up and make your bed. It's like having a monster for your mom. It's a combination. Like, oh, I'm your mom, but I'm also a monster. Like, I'm not going to make you soup, but I'm going to teach you how to make your own soup out in the middle of the wilderness. That kind of thing. In the Air Force, I put myself through college. So I'm the only person in the family who was a high school dropout and a college graduate. During that college time, I became a libertarian. I'm the opposite of a communist. And I also became less and less altruistic. Then after that, I was a cop in Philadelphia. And then I gave my life to Jesus. I was an IRS revenue officer. So as I confronted life more and more and more, I became less and less altruistic. And altruism means that you want to do things for other people, for the good of society, that you're not doing it for you. You're either altruistic or you're selfish. And I'm going to do a video on being selfish. I'm going to do it fairly soon. It's not going to have music involved with it. But being an altruist can get you in a lot of trouble, because you're really doing things for you. You're not doing things. You can help other people, and that's nice when you help other people. But back then, I was a deep altruist, and so the song that I'm going to end this with is an altruistic song. It's called For Every Man. And it represents a point of view that I no longer hold, but I still put it on the record player today. As I have now, not always on a record player, but I've listened to it, I don't know, 1 million times. And I meditate on it. I mean, I don't sit there looking at my belly button going, om, om, but I just reflect on it, we'll say, instead of meditate. And I still find a lot in this song to chew on. It makes me think back to what I believed then, and it makes me think about now, what I believe now. And that's kind of the point of this first video, Welcome to the Soundtrack of My Life, is that you should listen to music not as some mindless rumble in the background. And that's okay sometimes. If you're at work and they have the sound on, whatever they call that, the intercom sound on, especially if you're working retail, it's horrible. Retail at Christmas time, you just hear these songs over and over and over again. But for a certain part of your life, you should listen to music that makes you think. You should listen to music that gets to your soul. And you should revisit that music often. But more about that later. Now, the beach scene in Venice was uber cool. There was always like a festival atmosphere there. We had a friend, a guy named Skeeter Anderson, just the nicest man in the world. He played harmonica, but he didn't really play harmonica. He didn't have the chromatic harp that you can play in every key. He just had one harmonica. I don't know if it was in the key of C, but no matter what key you played in, he played on that harmonica. It was almost always out of tune because it wasn't in the same key, but he had a blast doing it, so we loved it. We would play guitars, and because I did a lot of guitar playing back then. Everybody that I knew played an instrument, and we would play together. I wasn't in a band or anything back then, but everybody played and had a great time. And Skeeter, he rode around on his bicycle around there. He was, you would call him homeless today. He said that he lived underneath Venice Pier, although I tried to stay there one night when I ran afoul of Bill Case and his girlfriend, and I didn't see anybody under there sleeping, and I wound up like just staying up all night. But he was there, and he really didn't play, but he was such a nice man. And there was a distinct odor as you walked. We lived on the 200 block of Windward. I think it was Windward Avenue, across from the Safeway and the post office right there. There was kind of a circle, and then you walked west 2 blocks, and you were at this thing that we called the Walkway. There's a 6 or 8 lane bicycle highway. You have Muscle Beach there with all the people on steroids working out. And as you went up there was something that you smelled. And it was the combination of 2 smells. I wrote a song about that. It was, I believe, the first song that I ever wrote. And I only remember the first verse, but let me see if I remember it now. I smell dog shit and incense at Windward and the walkway. There's a magic show going on. Skeeter's on his bike, blowing on his horn. Be there when the sun goes down. So I know what you're thinking. Boy, Grandpa, I'm glad you don't remember the rest of that song. And I'm glad too. I haven't played that song in, I don't know, 70 years. Everybody I talk to is ready to leave with the light of morning. They've seen the end coming down enough to believe. They've heard their last warning, standing alone. Each has his own ticket in his hand. As the evening descends, I sit thinking about every man. Seems like I've always been looking for some other place to get it together. But with a few of my friends, I could give up the race, maybe find something better. All my fine dreams, well thought out schemes to bring the motherland have all eventually come down, waiting for every man. Waiting here for every man. Make it on your own if you think you can. If you see somewhere to go, I understand. Waiting here for every man. Don't ask me if you'll show. I don't know. Make it on your own if you think you can. Later on you'll have to take a stand. Then you're gonna need a hand. Everybody's just waiting to hear from the one who can give them their answers and lead them back to the place in the warmth of the sun where sweet childhood still dances. Who come along and hold out that strong and gentle father's hand. Long ago I heard someone say something about every man. Peace out, guys.